This is the calm before the sleep. The nightly bedtime story with no real plot and no important characters. All you need to do is find a comfortable position, let your eyes flutter shut, and let yourself drift away into a cozy, sleepy world. Your story begins now. Welcome to the calm lighthouse. The lighthouse is located right by the bay. The sounds of the ocean and the occasional frog are the only sounds you can hear today. The lighthouse has a sunny top deck, which is a great place to sit and paint the bay. During a foggy day, you can walk outside, sit down and wait for the fog to roll in and start painting. Perhaps you can even enjoy a sandwich and some tea in the fog. There are some cabins near the lighthouse, where you can spend the night and then come back and paint in the daylight. It always seems as if a fresh sense of energy and color is given to my work after spending a night at the lighthouse. While here, I have painted many of the bayside and coastal scenes you can find hanging up at the lighthouse. It is one of the most beautiful areas of the island. The best time to paint at the lighthouse is during the winter when the fog settles in and the sea becomes less disturbed by the wind. The fog can last until early March, so make sure you are up early, if you do want to paint the lighthouse at that time. I was up here a few years ago and painted an aerial view of the bay. It was a great exercise for me as it forced me to try new ways to paint the water and view. A good thing too, as I have not painted a watercolor in years. Here is the view I had of the bay and shoreline. I remember a day that I was driving back to my home on the mainland after a day of painting at the lighthouse. I happened to glance over to the bay and to my amazement, I saw the sun shining off of the fog. The fog was still there, but the sun was reflecting on it. At first I thought it was just my imagination, but then realized that the water is just that beautiful. That magic didn't last long, but it was a lovely surprise. I hope you find the lighthouse and the beautiful grounds of the bay as inspiring as I do. I hope you enjoy my painting from the bay. I had painted several views from this location, so I decided to take several photos and paint my view. I was interested in painting the crashing waves and the contrast between the fog and the water and sun. I loved how the rocks and beach colors worked with the sunlight and clouds. My two favorite paintings show the road and the bay with the lighthouse in the background. I painted this perspective scene in black and white, as I love the warmth of the black and the contrast with the color of the sea. I went for a bit more color by adding yellow to the clouds and some pink to the sky. I painted this view while sitting on the sunny top deck. Though the sun is nice, this place gives me an appreciation of fog as well. I added some colorful trees and green foliage to the trees near the bay. I always loved to paint the beach with sand. This view is a study of ocean waves, as I had used this as a reference in several of my beach paintings. I especially enjoyed painting the green hills and golden sun. I painted this scene on a very foggy day and did not have much success getting a good view of the lighthouse. Sometimes fog comes and stays for a few days, but this one just seemed to move on. I did manage to paint a few little scenes though, including my favorite lighthouse, as seen in the top right photo. I painted the bay and the rocky shoreline. I think I like the way I painted the trees. I always like painting any trees, so I guess that is not surprising. I still haven't painted a tree in years. I did paint a view of the bay with some nice warm color. I think I like it best of all the paintings I have done here. It was cold at the lighthouse, but that did not stop me from painting. It was actually quite pleasant to be out there and get warm in my cabin. I enjoyed painting the sailboat and the rocks. I did a mix of acrylic and watercolor, with pastels for the ground and the sand. I painted these rocks as the sun was setting, for an interesting effect. I was still looking for unique views, when this elderly couple came to look at the lighthouse. They stood a long time, taking photos of the lighthouse and the island. I love the way their faces show the excitement of the moment. I think it is worth driving over to Plum Island just to paint the cliffs of the bluff. This part of the island is not as populated as the islands in the bay, so I really enjoy painting them. I have painted this spot many times, and loved how I got the green of the grass and the blue sky in the foreground. The sky turns orange in the distance and there is a boat coming toward the island. This was a nice surprise at the end of the day. The sun was setting just over the horizon. The water behind the lighthouse was still bright blue. I painted the scene in black and white, as I had been experimenting with this format. I really like the soft, misty clouds on the left, behind the lighthouse. There was another beautiful sunset on Plum Island. I enjoyed painting this part of the view. The sunset in my painting is very different from the sunset in real life. I also felt that the glow of the sun on the water was very dramatic. I like the difference between painting this and seeing it. I tried a drawing with colored pencils the other day. The colors in my palette were very muted, but I liked the textures of the rocks and hills, especially the colors of the rocks. I also painted in some tall grasses afterwards. I tried to capture the colors of the day on this shot of Plum Island. I was not successful, but it is the only photo I have of the lighthouse and bay in all of the fog and darkness. I painted this as the fog burned off and the sun was setting. One of my favorite things to paint are the rocks on the shore. I think it is important to paint rocks at least once in your life. I am always learning from how they are different on different shores and how I can paint them better. I did not take any pictures of the sunrise on Plum Island. I did not have my camera, but I tried to draw enough pictures to remember it by. The sky was bright blue, but the fog hung on. The lighthouse was perfectly visible, as were the islands in the bay. I found this to be very restful. I painted this on Plum Island and especially enjoyed painting the bridge between the islands. The colors in the sky were the bluest blue I have ever seen. I would be happy if I ever saw blue that color again. It was very special. I painted this from the tower of the lighthouse, looking out onto Plum Island and the open ocean. I think the way the waves crashed was especially dramatic. I loved the use of black and white and the color contrast of the sky. There is a cliff on Plum Island with several historical boats on it. I have painted this before. I love painting this view with the cliffs and trees in the distance. It is so beautiful. I know that as soon as I finish painting these boats, they will be in different positions and it will be time to paint them again. I love this view. There was a beautiful sunset the other night. I was painting in the field, in the dusky light of morning. I tried a painting with pastel. It worked out very well. This is a painting I finished the night before, as the fog burned off and the fog lifted. It was still dark, but the sun was shining. This is Plum Island in the mist and darkness of a cloudy day. I really liked how the reflection of the sky and the ocean sparkled in the soft light. It takes forever to get the colors right, but it is really worth it. This painting is inspired by the view from the plane flying over Plum Island. It was very foggy the other day. I was just flying to catch the sunset, when I saw the beach. I like how it is showing some of the textures and colors of the rocks and the water. I am still learning how to paint more texture and rocks. This is my favorite portrait painting of a crab. I really enjoyed painting this one. This picture is over a year old, but I just found it recently and I think I captured the emotion of the sweet little crab perfectly. I recently painted this picture in a field near the Plum Island Railroad. I love painting this scene with the tall grasses in the foreground and the fields in the distance. In retrospect, I used too many colors to have a correct representation of the scene. I am always learning how to be better. This is another picture from Plum Island, overlooking the bay. I really enjoy painting the way the sunsets look on the water. I was reading some mystery books for research for a new painting. and I was thinking how dramatic it would be to paint a mystery scene on the bay. I think I am going to go look for the right mystery story for my next painting. The fog is setting in on Plum Island on this picture. I think the sky in the background is prettiest at sunset. I was painting in my neighbor's field, when I discovered this patch of orange and yellow mushrooms. I decided to paint the mushrooms, and I really like how it turned out. I am working on a mural now, which I am painting on my neighbor's barn door. I think it turned out pretty well. I was painting in a haze of dust and smoke, but I like how the color looked with the orange and yellow in the foreground. I recently painted this gray landscape from the plane flying over Plum Island. I liked the way the trees reflected in the water. I know that some of the colors and tones are overdone, but I still think this looks like it could be what a person could see on the ocean side of the island. I recently found this old shack on Plum Island. It looked run down, and might not be the prettiest subject to paint, but I think it captures the beauty of the island. I used a wide-angle brush, and I used it to paint all the edges. I was trying to capture the scruffy look of the brush around the shack. I like how it turned out. This is a view of the pines near Plum Island. I think the colors in the pines and the grasses in the distance match very well together. I love the view from the Plum Island airport. I painted this scene from the cockpit of a 6-passenger plane. I always love painting from the plane, and I am starting to enjoy the way the sunset colors change in the cockpit window. I always have a great view of the sunset from the cockpit. I like to paint time-lapse videos of the sunsets at Plum Island. This was my favorite one so far. I took this picture when I was painting my mother's friend's house. It was a hot day, and I found this stone bench in the shade and decided to finish my sunset painting from there. It was a nice place to paint, with the bright green leaves and the colors of the sky. This is a sunset at the Palisades along the Plum Island Railroad. I like the way the clouds reflect in the water. This is a nice view. I love how the wind is blowing in this picture. This painting took me several hours. I had a hard time painting the reflections in the water, but it turned out pretty nice. I really enjoy painting still life images. I was painting a treetop. It was hard to paint at first because the wind was blowing the leaves all over the place. I eventually found a nice tree to sit in and paint the treetop. I also enjoyed painting this tree because of the shadows it cast on the ground. This is another shot from the same treetop. I have a lot of pictures of this treetop that I have taken throughout the year. I decided to paint it. This is a view of the Plum Island Railroad, which is still under construction. The tools and lumber strewn about add a nice effect. I love how the large rocks in the foreground help break up the green grass in the background. I enjoyed painting this scene with the clouds. It was hard to paint the flowers in the foreground because they are so close to the bright green grass, so I decided to use a paint color that was slightly darker than the petals were in real life. I love the colors of this scene. I was trying to make the shadows match the colors in the sky. It was a very bright day, and the shadows were long. I painted this scene on the Cranberry River Bridge, while I was waiting for the sun to go down. I like the way the grass and the trees in the background match the trees in the foreground. I painted this scene while my mom was painting the bridge nearby. We had a lovely afternoon, and enjoyed tea with scones. I had a great view of the Southport sunset. It was a nice change of pace from all the bright yellow leaves. I liked the way the colors of the leaves reflect on the water. It looks like there are more water lilies than plants in the field. I decided to paint myself in this picture as well. I liked how the painter is silhouetted against the water. My favorite sunset scene on Plum Island is one that shows how the colors in the sky change in the distance. This painting is from the Lighthouse. The sunsets are always nice to see from the lighthouse. It is a great vantage point. This painting is of a nice country scene near Plum Island. I painted this while I was waiting for the ferry. I was glad to see that there were still water lilies in bloom on this secluded island. You can also see the ferry in the corner of the scene. This is one of my favorite sunsets. I think the color of the sky matched the color of the house very well. I love how the colors of the sky and the water in the distance match each other. This sunset was an unexpected treat. It was such a beautiful day on Plum Island. I enjoy painting sunset scenes. This one was a bit tricky because the sky was very intense. I like how it looked, but it took me several hours to get it right. I enjoy painting in the summer, so I decided to paint something summery. I decided to hike the Cranberry Trail, and paint the view from the summit. I thought this would be a good place to paint, with the blazing orange sun. I really enjoyed painting this scene because of the way the paint reflects in the water. I thought that the light reflected off the barn in the distance, which really helped emphasize the shapes of the trees. This was a scene that was painted near my parents' house on the morning of my birthday. It was a beautiful day to paint. The colors in this scene are very bright. I like how the trees were at the same angle as the small deer off in the distance. I thought it looked nice. I liked the contrast of the darker green in the background, and the brighter colors in the foreground. I painted this scene on a cliff near the ocean. The clouds reminded me of the way my grandpa's eyes looked as he took a picture of my dog. There are so many ways to get inspiration for a painting, and really no wrong way to do it. I really enjoyed painting this scene. I thought that the stone of the cliff looked really nice with the pink flowers and red trees. It is also fun to go on an adventure to get to a scenic place in order to get a beautiful painting. I painted this one after going on a long bike ride climbing up a cliff. I had to paint from memory. I have always liked the long shadows from the cliff. I painted this scene with the hopes that people will be inspired to go for a bike ride. I really like the way the trees reflected the sunlight. It is nice to have a little bit of mountain scenery in the middle of Plum Island. This was another scene that I painted in my yard. It was a rainy, sunny day. What a beautiful and surreal feeling it is to have rain on a sunny day. I enjoyed painting this scene. I loved how it was done. It was a scene that I painted before during a sunny day, but the rain just made this one even better. This was another scene I painted near my house. The path was covered in snow, but the cherry trees were still in bloom. I liked how the pink roses in the background looked against the blue sky. This painting was done in my yard. I really liked how this painting turned out. I liked the contrast of the pink with the blue of the sky. This painting was done by my sister. Everyone in my family likes art and painting. She painted the yellow flowers on the trees. I liked how she painted the different shades of pink in the flowers. She has always liked painting flowers. This was another painting I painted while I was waiting for the ferry to come back. The colors in this painting are very bright. I really like painting the wake caused by the ferry. I loved how the sun was hitting the dock. The ice cream cart in the foreground added a nice pop of color. I really like how I was able to paint this scene while I was waiting for the ferry. This was a picture I took on the way to the farmer's market. I wanted to get there early, so I painted it on the way, from the back of the pedicab. I loved how the sky and ocean came together. This was a painting I painted while my mother was visiting. I would take a painting over to her room and she would watch me paint. I liked the color of the ocean and the sky. I liked how the windows on the boats reflected the sunlight. My favorite medium is watercolor. I think that watercolors make it easy to add very subtle shading effects. I also like using acrylics, because of the vibrant colors. I often use oil to add more depth. I also like referencing other people's photographs and painting from memory. This photo is a family heirloom, and I am deeply inspired by it. It is an image of my grandpa, when he was in his teens, posing next to his grandpa's fishing boat. When I saw the photo, I thought of how I liked painting boats. This photo reminded me of the small beach near my house where my grandpa would take me fishing. I painted this image of the sea near my cottage during a storm. I really like how the colors of the waves were all mixed up. I thought that it was going to be a dull painting, but as I worked I saw that the colors really worked together to make something beautiful. This was another photo I took during a storm. I love how the color of the water is gloomy yet vibrant. I like how the building in the distance is very detailed. This is a scene that I painted in Onion Bay. I love the feel of Onion Bay. It is really different from the areas I normally paint, but I really like it. This was an image I took during a hike up the bay. The clouds look like big dollops of whipped cream. I really like how the blue of the sky reflected the blue of the water. I think it was very beautiful. This was a photo I took during a hurricane. I was lucky to be in my cottage in Cranberry Bay when we had a hurricane. The rain against my windows was very soothing as I tried to sleep, and the next day I was able to paint the wet marshes around the cottage. In this painting I tried to paint the barn with bright colors to represent the seasons. I love that this painting is outdoors. I felt really peaceful when I painted this. I painted this picture to give my sister, who is in nursing school. She hung it up over her desk so that she can look at something pretty while she studies. One day, she will hang it up in her office. This was a portrait I painted of my sister. My sister and I used to do projects like this. I used mostly colors that she likes, and I used acrylic paints for the background. She liked how it turned out, so I took a picture of it. This was a picture I took while on a beach. The painting looks a little like the water is coming out of the clouds. I love how the colors all came together to form a beautiful picture. I paint mostly abstract pictures, but I will sometimes paint people as well. Here is a painting of my grandfather. I looked at a photograph of him while painting it, and I like how the hat and beard turned out. I used a water brush to make the whole thing look more realistic. This picture reminds me of him, and I really liked painting his likeness. I used acrylics for the colors. This was an image of a sunset that I took while in Antigua. I like how the shapes of the clouds and sky come together. It was taken moments before a huge thunderstorm. I call this painting Imminent Deluge. I like how the seagull is enjoying being a witness to the storm. I sometimes like painting in my garage, where I have set up a small studio for myself, but I also like taking my easel with me out into the world. I love my paints and my supplies. The studio I have in my garage always smells of fresh lumber and acrylic paint. That smell always puts me in the mood for creativity. I usually also drink a cup of tea while I am painting. One time, when I was painting the creek next to the Plum Island Railroad, I realized that my tea was the exact same color as the path to the railroad station. I dipped my brush in the tea and used it to paint. Tea makes a great watercolor paint. Sometimes, improvisation is necessary when trying to create something. There really is no wrong way to paint, which is why it is such an enjoyable pastime. Landscapes are my favorite thing to paint. I used to draw, but I found that painting served as a form of therapy for me, so I began to paint. I try to paint as many different subjects as I can, and I really enjoy painting landscapes and still lifes. When I paint people, I usually sketch them first and then paint them afterwards, because I am still learning how to get the proportions right. I also like to paint flowers. I use bright colors in my paintings. One of the main reasons I use bright colors is because I enjoy seeing my paintings come to life. It brings me a lot of pleasure to see my paintings appear as if they are breathing. I try to paint portraits of every type of animal I come across. I don't usually get a lot of requests for paintings, but I did get one request to paint a portrait of my neighbor's dog. I am glad I agreed to do that because it turned out that my neighbor liked the painting so much that he took it home and hung it on the mantel above the fireplace. I guess it is good to keep doing what you like. When I was a child, I painted portraits of my friends. I used acrylic paints, and my father would help me. He would paint the background, and I would paint the person. That is how I learned to paint people, though I eventually got better at doing landscapes. I used acrylic paints and colored pencils for the colors. Painting is very fun because you can see a visual of all the progress you have made. You can look back on paintings you did when you were a child, and feel proud about how much you have improved over time. Or, if you don't feel that you have improved, you can still feel proud that you kept up with a fun hobby that you enjoy. It is important to do things that we enjoy doing. Sometimes I have trouble with a specific drawing. For instance, I painted the side of a building in Liverpool, but I didn't like the way it looked. I almost gave up painting and decided to paint something else. Then I thought about it, and I decided that I would just make the building abstract instead. So I painted it with a lot of texture. I think that helped me to like it a little more. I have wanted to paint a horse for a long time. I finally had the opportunity to do it, and I had a lot of fun painting her. It was fun because I became friends with the horse while I painted her. Her name was Peanut Butter, and she loved to eat apples. I used a brown pastel crayon to paint the outline of the horse on the paper, and then I used some orange and tan colors to color in the horse's fur. Then I used pure black activated charcoal to make the tip of her tail stand out. That is how I created the illusion of the wind. She also liked to get lots of hay, so I drew a barn next to Peanut Butter. I used a different colored marker to color in the sides of his head and the tip of his nose. The only colors that I used to color the barn were red and yellow, because I wanted the barn to be pop of color. After that, I used white crayon to color the stallion. I feel that painting horses is more difficult than painting people. They do not want to stay still. That means you have to spend a lot of time on the painting. I used oil paint, a heavy-duty brush, and lots of paint to make the horse look as realistic as possible. The horse lived at my neighbor's house, and my neighbor hung up the painting in the stable once it was dry. I have been painting for 10 years, and I have spent several thousand hours painting over all that time. There have been times when I have said that I am going to stop painting, but I have always come back to it and continued to paint. This painting was done in a series, and it was my most successful painting so far. I painted the branches of an apple tree with lots of sunlight shining through. I used a lot of color on this piece, and I was proud of the way it turned out. It was very difficult to make the apple blossoms look translucent, but I achieved that look with watercolors. I was inspired by a book I read recently about a painter who lived 100 years ago. I do not remember the name of the book, but it had a great impact on me nonetheless. He wanted to collect paintings of people, but he couldn't find anyone to paint them for him, so he had to paint them himself. That was a very brave thing to do at that time, because it was against the law in the county where he lived. I think the backstory behind his paintings are fascinating. It made me realize that every painting has a backstory. There may be more than meets the eye for any piece of art. For instance, I find a lot of beauty in murals that are painted onto old buildings. When I look at the painting on the side of my barn, I can almost hear the blue jays singing. I painted this picture because I wanted to try something new. I am glad that I did it because I love it. All of the pictures that I put on the barn walls are from a series about nature. When I was doing the series, I had different colors of paint, and I used several layers to make the pictures come to life. My mother said that I did it perfectly. I also added a picture in a frame at the entrance of the barn. The picture was done in watercolors. I used watercolor paint and very thin brushes. The watercolors have a different look from acrylics. You can see the texture of the acrylic when you paint with it, but the watercolor flows and blends. I have made a lot of art like this. This is the first picture that I painted back when I was just a young child. It is a beautiful sunset. I love the light coming through the trees. I was inspired to paint it because my puppy loved sunsets. I have created a new series inspired by that painting, which is a study of different butterflies that are native to Plum Island. The series started because of my niece, Olivia. I love butterflies, and I have always thought that I would make a picture of a butterfly in her favorite color. I have had this idea in my head for a while, and I finally decided to get started on it. I used watercolors for this picture. I used the same method of painting as I used for all of my other pictures. In this picture, there is an apple tree in the background. Olivia is in the apple tree, and she is holding a bouquet of flowers. I painted this picture because I wanted to try something new. I am glad that I did it because I love it. When I was doing the series, I mixed different colors of paint, and I used several layers to make the pictures come to life. This is the second picture that I painted for this series. It is an apple blossom. I had never seen an apple blossom until I went to Yellowstone. It reminded me of my trip to the Plum Island Park. I hope to have more apple blossoms in my future. This is the third picture that I painted for this series. I thought that the peacock feather would make a nice background. It is a vibrant blue color, with emerald green accents. This picture is the first one where I used watercolors. I had never used them before, but I found that I loved them. I used watercolor paint and thin brushes. I enjoyed doing this picture. This is the fifth picture that I painted for this series. It is an oak leaf. I enjoyed doing the painting. It is a bright green. I painted this picture because I want to have leaves in the series for a more natural touch. I am thinking about leaves because I love spring, and I have always thought that I would make a pamphlet about the different plants that grow on Plum Island. I have had this idea in my head for a while, and I finally decided to get started on it. I used watercolors and thin brushes. I really like the look of acrylics, but I am very attached to the watercolor paint. It is hard to get off your brushes when you are finished painting, so I will probably go back to acrylics at some point in the future. This is the sixth picture that I painted for this series. It is a flower. It is the first one where I put a bee into the picture. I think that it is really cool, but it is not a bee that I have ever seen before. I painted this picture because I want to make a picture of a flower that has a bee in it. I am not sure why I want to do that, but I really think that it would be cool. I did this picture because I wanted to try something new. I think that it was fun to do. I recently did a painting of a big purple mountain. It really looks quite majestic. I first saw this mountain in a dream. It is an almost otherworldly blue. The mountains in my dreams look like this. Sometimes, I can see this mountain without seeing the purple in the background. It is harder to draw something that I have only seen in my dreams than something that I have actually seen in real life. I think that it is harder to keep it all balanced, and it is harder to finish a painting like this than a realistic picture. This is another painting I did inspired by that same dream. It is an owl. I like owls, and I have always thought that I would hang a picture of an owl in my own house. I decided to go with a forest owl instead of a barn owl. I painted this picture because I wanted to try something new. I did not do the painting until after I thought about it for a while. I also tried to paint a deer, but the deer kept on looking like a rabbit. Partway through my painting process, I added big ears and a cottontail because it looked better that way. I was never sure why the deer kept changing into rabbits. I painted this picture because I did not know what to paint. I was just sitting at my desk and trying to decide what to paint. It looked kind of cool, so I painted it. I used a thin watercolor brush for the hair. I used a thin paintbrush for the antlers. I also used a thick paintbrush to do a kind of snowy outline of the antlers. Different paint brushes are good for different jobs. I have a lot of paintbrushes in my collection. I have paint brushes that are 2 feet wide, and tiny thin little brushes that only have 5 or 6 bristles. I sometimes use a sponge to do my painting. All of my paint brushes are different sizes. I will be adding the rest of my paintings in the next few days. This is the second painting that I did for this series. I am not sure why I decided to paint a monkey, but it turned out well. I would like to paint a monkey again. I found this image in a book of animal pictures. I was looking at pictures of monkeys and decided that I wanted to paint a monkey. I did not know exactly what to paint, so I decided to draw one first. It was very difficult, because I did not have any particular subject matter in mind. I just wanted to do something new. When I finished the monkey, I decided that I wanted to make a series of animal paintings. I had never painted a monkey, but I had looked at a lot of monkey pictures. This is the third and final painting for this series. I tried to stay with the monkey idea, but it was hard to get a good idea of how I wanted to paint it. I decided that I wanted a monkey that was partly out in the jungle. I used a charcoal crayon to paint the jungle. I tried not to use much paint. I used my lightest touch. I added tiny dots of brown paint to give the color some background. I just did a tiny little stroke of brown over the gray. I am now trying to decide what to paint next. I could make a list of animals that I could paint, and then I could choose the animal for my next painting. I think that this could be fun. For the state fair, I am going to present a painting that I did a few months ago. I didn't do it specifically for the fair, but I think it is perfect. This painting was inspired by one of those dreams where you see a landscape that you have never seen in real life. I think that when I try to draw a landscape that I have never seen in real life, it usually looks more like a bunch of bushes than a cohesive image. When I first started this painting, I used a grey crayon and put the rock color all over the mountain. It did not look very rock-like, so I used a dark grey for the background. The mountains in my dreams have been mostly pink or white. I wanted to do some yellow mountains as well. I took another crayon and colored all of the bushes a pretty dark pink. I used a light purple for the sky and darker purple for the clouds. I used a dark brown for the grass. I added black as well as grey to give the rocks a little more definition. It was the first time that I used a white crayon. I used that color to make the sky a darker grey, so that it would not wash out when I put all of the dark colors down. The white mountain reflected the pink color of the mountains. I could use the same method to make mountains that are other colors. My dreams. After the state fair, I will start working on the next series of paintings. I am looking forward to painting some birds. I am not sure what else I will paint. I might paint a bird sitting on a branch, or maybe a bird flying. I have a photo of a dragonfly that I can use for inspiration on the wings. I love painting so much. Is it really a delightful hobby?